Welcome to the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show. Here's your host, Alex Klausner and Bobby Carney.
Welcome, everybody, to the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show, where Dynasty never sleeps. I am Alex Klausner, one of your ever-faithful hosts, and this is my co-host, Bobby Carney, and tonight we are going to be diving in to the Dallas Cowboys' victory over the New York Giants on Thursday Night Football. And let's just go ahead and get started. We are going to talk about game balls. All right. So these are the guys that really succeeded and smashed for your fantasy team last night. So we are going to do a game ball, one player from each team. So the Giants game ball. Bobby, I'm going to give you a drum roll and you tell me about our first game ball. Here we go.
Yes, it is Malik Nabers, obviously. He had a really great night for the Giants. 12 catches on 15 targets, 115 yards. No touchdown, sadly. No, the Giants could not find a way to get it in the end zone at all. But yes, that's from my recollection, that's 3 20-plus point games from Malik Nabers. Now, we'll see how it ends up after everybody's played week 4, but as of now, he is wide receiver 1 in fantasy, let alone dynasty. So to sit there and have that type of production from a year 1 guy, for some teams, is going to be transformative. Like, there's a lot of teams that really needed a guy like this on their team. That's why they're in those top 3, top 4 picks. And to get a world killer like that on your team can really help pivot your team into the right direction. So I'll be interested to see kind of if the production again keeps going. But something we were kind of discussing a little bit beforehand is wide receivers being like quarterback proof of like, hey, it doesn't matter who's throwing the ball to them, they're going to be able to produce. And we were previous owners of Terry McLaurin and that's why we drafted Terry McLaurin. There was nobody else in that room. He was going to thrive in there. And, you know, he's now pretty much been 1,000-yard plus receiver on average with dozens of quarterbacks that he's thrown to. And now it's going to be interesting to see. Now we don't have it. I at least don't have any investments in Terry McLaurin anymore. And I don't want this to turn to a Terry McLaurin section. But it's interesting to see how that guy's production might jump having Daniel's now quarterback. It'll be interesting to see how much Nabers' production could possibly jump with a better person behind quarterback in the future.
Absolutely. I mean, we've definitely seen cases where receivers can kind of come alive when they start to get somebody throwing them the football. But to be honest with you, I think Malik Nabers is an interesting case for kind of this operating theory that I have is that sometimes when you have a guy who's at least shall we say, a startable quarterback in the NFL, right? Somebody that you are able to convince yourself on a week-to-week basis that at least this guy may have an opportunity to go out and win us a game. I'm not talking about like a Skylar Thompson, for example, who like can't support any fantasy assets on any given week, seemingly, right? But there are starting quarterbacks in this NFL that, even though you don't necessarily view them as world beaters, will still be able to deliver the ball to somebody, right? And the way that I see it, NFL teams always have to throw the football, right? Even on bad teams, especially on bad teams, teams in negative game scripts, you're going to see that quarterback dropping back a lot more when they're losing. That's just reality. We talk about garbage time points. You know who was the king of this? Blake Bortles back in 2015, right? We saw him turn in a great fantasy season, essentially because he was playing from behind most of the game and he was just having to like chuck it to Allen Robinson down the field. And Allen Robinson turned into a guy that we thought was going to be like the fantasy wide, like a top fantasy wide receiver for a long time, right? As a result of largely that dynamic. So when you have bad teams, don't be afraid to go get the wide receiver, especially when that wide receiver is the only dude in the room. Now, I mean, like we actually did see a good game out of Wandale Robinson like this week. Like I thought Wandale actually um really made a nice case for himself in fantasy, although we'll talk about like the real life results a little bit when we get into Wandale. But my point is that Malik Nabers is clearly the alpha dog like target. And even though you have concerns about Daniel Jones had a pretty good game throwing the football. The
Yeah, he
accuracy,
was almost 70, he was over 70% completions. Yeah.
he was making some really, really nice throws out there, and his completion percentage should be higher. There was this one ball I saw Daniel Jones throw to Tyrone Tracy. That was literally the best ball I have ever seen Daniel Jones throw in his entire life. You know what I'm saying? So, my point being is, I think Malik Nabers is going to smash. Now, one thing that did happen in this game that we got to talk about is Malik got a concussion. And he did it trying to make like this diving play on the sideline, trying to play some hero ball, just kind of let his head hit the turf really hard. Kind of looked like that Tua thing, you know. He definitely like took a shot going down for that ball. But we're gonna have to monitor Malik's availability going forward because of that. So just keep in mind that Malik Nabers did sustain an injury. It's a concussion. So we do expect to see him back on the field relatively quickly. For receivers, that tends not to be as serious of a concern as like a quarterback like Tua Tagovailoa, for example. But you may experience some unavailability from Malik Nabers. So let's get into our next game ball, and that will go to Cowboys wide receiver CeeDee Lamb. So Bobby, why don't you tell me about CeeDee Lamb and the game he had? You were noting that he had some totes of the rock. Let's dive into that usage and how that may be a benefit for your fantasy team going forward.
No, this is definitely like targets weren't crazy number. It's 7 of 8. So nothing. He didn't have Malik Nabers numbers, but he's also not into like he's fringe double digits, but he wasn't there. But still, 98 yards and a touchdown. When you can get that 15-point floor on any given platform, like that's exactly what you're looking for with a receiver. What was interesting me a little bit watching some of that game is him getting rushes in the backfield. Now, granted, it only ended up being 3 carries for 8 yards, but because I don't watch too much Cowboys football, but what I was wanting to do is I'm like, okay, I see some CeeDee Lamb rushes. Is this something kind of new, or is this something that they've kind of done? So I went, I was looking back. He averages about 10 rushes a season, and we're at week 4 and he's already got 6. So they're definitely running him more. He's on pace, not for a crazy amount. Like Deebo Samuel's averages 43 rushes a season, where CD's kind of at like a 25 pace right now. So he's not getting close to Deebo, but as this backfield continues to disappoint, you have to sit there and wonder if CD can start getting, 20, 30 yards rushing a game. Well, those carries might go up to 5, and now you are looking at a little bit of a Deebo Samuel's production. We're always sitting there talking about like cheat codes in fantasy. Can you get a guy that's kind of 2 players? Can you get a person that, like we always talk about with quarterbacks, and get a guy who can get you some rushing touchdowns and rushing yards because it's a cheat code? That could be something with CeeDee Lamb now. He was already a very productive wide receiver. If he can start getting you 20 rushes and maybe a touchdown rushing probably every 2 to 3 games, like you got to start factoring that in of like, hey, he can now get you an extra 6 to 8 points on that production alone as well because of the Dallas backfield. Now, it might not be something that's going to keep going. Maybe once they finally actually have a running back again, then that production might slightly go down again. But, they paid him $140-something million. Like, it could be that too of like, hey, you're taken care of, we're taken care of, let's get you the ball now no matter what.
There is an aspect, though, that you want to be concerned about as a fantasy owner, which is really the point that Bobby just brought up, which is the contract. You've got to think about the fact that when you make that kind of investment in a player, right, you also want to protect that investment too, to some degree. You don't want to just go spamming the CeeDee Lamb button, because every time you do, you put that player at risk. Look at Christian McCaffrey, for example. The more you load him up, his body takes a toll on his body. He can get hurt, right? So I think that something you have to be really careful of when you're giving CeeDee Lamb these touches is exposing him to that risk of injury, especially when we know there is a higher kind of risk of contact on a rush play versus when you're a receiver, maybe you get to the boundary, you can get out of bounds. As a runner, a lot of the time, especially taking carries out of the backfield, you're going to take a shot from somebody. You know what I mean? So that is something to keep in mind is, are the Cowboys really going to want to load up CeeDee Lamb with those Deebo Samuel type carries, especially when you see the fact that Deebo Samuel is largely unavailable due to the fact that he has all of these additional touches. You know what I mean? And then you're taking probably your only offensive weapon that you really have to rely on for Dak out of the game, like doing that, right? So that would be a reason why, as a coach or a GM or somebody who's in charge of a football team, I would maybe want to not do that kind of usage for CeeDee. So just from a football like philosophy standpoint, you may not see the Cowboys go that direction. So that's just something to watch out for. You're going to want to monitor how many carries does CeeDee get, how efficient is he with those carries, before you really start saying, oh yes, I am going to get this additional value. Now, from us going into that, one thing I do want to say is, I don't know how much that rushing value is even going to change your valuation of CeeDee Lamb, right? We all know this guy is like the dynasty wide receiver one. So if you know what I'm saying, like, you're not necessarily going to get you're not necessarily like finding some gem, in the rough here, like buying CeeDee Lamb for the rushing production or anything.
It's just more of a situation of, if you're trying to like flip him, like, it's an argument you can kind of now say of like, hey, well, there's some of these hidden yardage that you're now getting with him.
Yeah. If you're trying to make the case of, I'm selling for the big wide receiver king's ransom, you know what I mean? Maybe that rushing case, you can kind of be like, well, look at the rushes, maybe you want to talk in an extra little pitch for that. So we are going to go ahead and move on to away from our dominators and move into the bell of shame. Ding! All right, so the first one goes out to wide receiver Brandon Cooks from the Dallas Cowboys, who's 1 of 4 for 16 yards, was good for 2 fantasy PPR points. I think a lot of people have been kind of looking at Brandon Cooks as maybe like this like sneaky flex play because he's the Cowboys wide receiver too and all of that. But I mean, can he even be trusted as that at this point?
The Cowboys wide receiver too is Ferguson, their tight end. I don't want to go back an episode of our tight end wasteland, but like having 7 for 7 on his targets, 49 receiving yards, no touchdown, but like, when you're saying the tight end is getting 7 targets to Brandon Cook's 4, that tells you right there who they're targeting more, or at least who Dak is targeting more.
He's only one behind CeeDee Lamb, in the target share, and that's their dominant wide receiver one, right? That's their alpha dog. So if you've got a guy that's like, yeah, right there with the targets, it definitely makes the case for that person as the true wide receiver too, and that's what you're getting in Jake Ferguson, right? But can Brandon Cooks even be trusted as the third target in this offense?
I mean, you would expect it to be. I understand, like, looking at the core and that, you'd expect somebody, even like with Tolbert, like you'd expect somebody to start filling in the void. But I think we will have to take a little bit of the New York game as you will have to sprinkle a little salt on it with the passing numbers, because you have to also recall, like, there's only 27 passes from Dak. Like, a lot of these receiving numbers are because they were just that efficient in the passing game, being 22 of 27. Like the receivers, 7 on 8 targets. That, I mean, granted, Brandon Cooks is the only one that really was not performing with the few targets that he got. So that's something to be concerned about.
Tolbert didn't smash either by any stretch. Like, he definitely, I think he was what, like three, he had a JSN game, like three of
But
three
he was
for
3 of 3.
four.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he made the most of his few targets, whereas Brandon Cooks is making the littlest. He might as well have gone 0 for 4. It was not great. So
Hey
when you're
man, his target got him a first down, or his
yeah,
one catch got him a first down. So, like, yeah, I understand. Like, it's definitely rough. I would definitely probably prefer to own Jalen Tolbert than Brandon Cooks in Dynasty, just because of the age factor alone. Um, but also just the fact that, yeah, I don't really see Brandon Cooks being an impact guy for this offense be much, and I could see Jalen Tolbert really making, just taking that job outright, like after this week. So we're next going to move on to the New York Giants. Bell of shame. Drum roll, please, for Bobby.
yes, it is Devin Singletary. It is their running back that they decided to not pay Saquon Barkley for. They said, no, we have Saquon Barkley at home. We're going to give him his jersey number, and we're going to make everybody think that this is Saquon Barkley, but it is, in fact, not Saquon Barkley.
He wears
14
26,
carries.
guys.
Yeah, he wears 26, guys. Doesn't it look the same? He has 14 carries for 24 yards. He caught his solo target for 14 yards, but still, just target share alone, you cannot be getting 38 yards from a running back, you know? And it's one of those situations, like, I can't remember where we stood when he had that kind of big game not that long ago. What was it, last week?
Yeah.
Yeah, last week, where he was 16, 65, a touchdown, 4 targets, 43 yards. He had over 100 yards total.
You said he was your top sell when we were in pre-production for that episode.
Yeah, so this is why I told you to sell him. It was he had back-to-back near 100-yard games, and you had your chance to sell him of, like, see, look, this is why they didn't need Saquon. And now you're seeing why they should have kept Saquon. So there's something to, like, he can still have that bounce back, and maybe that window can come back, but, like, all you can sit there and sell right now is, like, hey, he's gonna keep getting 15 plus carries because there's nobody else there.
Right. It's like that whole thing we were kind of talking about with, like, Najee Harris, right? Last week. It's like, you can get the football, but at some point you have to do something with the football to generate fantasy points and scoring and value for the people that are playing the game, right? So, I mean, yeah, the yardage just isn't going to cut it. That's wildly inefficient running. And I think the New York Giants are going to be in big trouble if they can't get that running game
I mean, that's
going to
less than 2
support
yards a
them.
carry.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Now we're going to move on to our buys and sells from this game. And so we talked about Devin Singletary as a sell. Now we're going to talk about another running back that I believe is a little bit of a sell here, and that is going to be Dallas Cowboys running back Rico Dowdle, who got you 13 points in this game, a respectable flex week, 11 touches in the run game for 46 yards. He also added on a touchdown, which really buoyed his fantasy value this week in the receiving game on his single target. So here's the sell case for Rico Dowdle. He's 26 years old. He's on a 1-year contract as an undrafted free agent. To me, so far, his production resembles like a diet Najee Harris. He gets you about the same result as Najee on fewer touches. He's getting 10 to 12 rushes a game. He's not getting in the end zone much besides this 1 week. And we really haven't seen Rico Dowdle be usable. So here's my question. Like, we know that, yes, Rico Dowdle does have an opportunity to seize this backfield because Zeke Elliott isn't performing. Deuce Vaughn isn't giving you anything. There's really nobody else in the Dallas run game that looks even remotely close to being as good as Rico Dowdle, who does have 4.0 yards per carry, like usually in his running. So I will say that for Rico, but like, Bobby, can you make a buy case for Rico right now?
No, from a dynasty perspective, no. You can't make a buy case because so much of what I'm always looking into when I'm buying a player is where am I going to be at 3, 4 years down the road? Because you can never go that far down the road, 6, 7 years. You can easily kind of predict a 2 to 3 year window sometimes, but when it comes to Rico, like that contract, that age, like best case scenario is he tears it up. He actually starts getting 20 plus carries. Now he's getting in that 80, 100 yard range because of his yards per carry. Get some touchdowns. Then what? Is he going to stay there? Because this team is a prime candidate for spending a first or second round pick on a running back next year. So this is one of those teams when you're starting to look at fantasy as like when you're starting to look at your draft boards for next year, this is where you start seeing of like, this is where a running back needs to land next year. So, and then even if he does pop off and they do re-sign him, they're still going to have to draft somebody because there's no way, in my opinion, they're going to bring Zeke back. Deuce Vaughn's definitely not going to be a guy that you have to keep worrying about. So regardless, I just feel like there's going to be a guy to come in there young and it's going to challenge that role. And then all of whatever draft capital or talent capital you put into getting Rico on your team is all going to go away because there's going to be a young guy in town. And then that's everybody we're going to talk about with signing.
One of the things that I think you also have to watch out for, and this is a nice plug for watching the Hot Seat Index shows that I put out when we talking about coaches getting fired, right, is that Mike McCarthy is really in a big way on the hot seat this year, right? Mike McCarthy is one of those guys that I think has a serious chance of getting fired at the end of the year because I think Jerry may be looking to make a change. There's been a lot of question marks around Mike McCarthy as the head coach in Dallas. He's not been re-upped. He's on a lame duck contract right now. So like literally they can just let his contract expire. They don't even need to fire him. They can just say, thank you for your service. Your time is up. And they don't have to pay him any extra guaranteed money. So I think there's a serious chance that you're looking at a new regime in Dallas next year. And even if Rico Dowdle does do some good things this year, I just can see that new regime going, no thanks. We'll find somebody better. So I think getting a second round pick for Rico Dowdle, if you can successfully make the case like, hey, this guy's going to be a producer in this backfield for at least this year, maybe you can get somebody to give you a second for Rico and get some value out of that. And then just like, go take that and move on and find somebody that's going to be a little more productive for you on a week-to-week basis. Because I do think you can take any second that you sell Rico Dowdle for and then turn around and go get another running back that's in his like a similar situation that will do better.
Something short-term you should look at when it comes to Rico Dowdle and Dallas in general is their next 3 games at Pittsburgh, Detroit, at San Fran. So you need to think about those matchups for Rico Dowdle of like, what's he going to do against those top defenses? Like, is he going to, because he's playing the Giants and he's going 11 carries, 46 yards. What's he going to do when he plays Pittsburgh? What's he going to do when he's playing San Fran? And then if the Dallas Cowboys lose all 3 of those games and they're at 2-5, like Mike might be done then.
I don't know that I see Jerry Jones making a mid-season change necessarily. I mean, I guess we have seen him do that before with what did he do that? We did it with Wade Phillips and moved to Jason Garrett, right? So I mean, I guess he has done that before, but he only did that because he thought that there was somebody internally that he wanted to get a look at. So who does he have internally that he wants to get a look at being the head coach for the team? You know what I mean? It's not like he really has like the next great exciting offensive coordinator on the team like he thought he had at the time with Jason. So, all right, let's get into our buy for this game. I think it's pretty clear that the best value on the market right now, I think, for wide receivers is Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale Robinson is like this mini fantasy target hog. We've been talking about him, I think, since last week episode, right? We've been talking about how Wan'Dale has been sneakily really getting in the mix at wide receiver in New York, and Daniel Jones is starting to look his way a lot. Last week, he had 8 targets. This week, the man had 14 targets. 11 of 14 for 71 yards is the stat line. That was good for 18 points PPR. Now, here's the buy case for Wan'Dale. 23. He's got 2 years left on his deal. Production, starting to produce a little bit. And the usage, he's getting a lot of targets for guys of his stature. I mean, this one thing to note about Wan'Dale is like, dude is like 5'8". I mean, I think like I might rival Wan'Dale Robinson's size. That's not a good thing when you play in the NFL. But what he has been able to do is get a really unusually large target share for players like him. You know, usually you see these guys be like the deep threat, whatever. You know, this guy's getting a lot of targets. So, Bobby, the question is, do you think he can keep that up? Is that something we can expect the rest of the season? Is there a sell case for Wan'Dale right now? What do you think?
I mean, I definitely think he is an asset right now. It's very fluid. I think if you want to get out now, I don't think you're going to have any issue trying to get rid of him now. And I think if you want to buy, I think there's going to be a ton of people that are like, sure, I'll move on from Wan'Dale, because they might believe that this sample size is kind of like it's a fluke, it's early season stuff. For me, it's always seeing coaches design plays for this person. They were literally designing plays where Nabers is a decoy for him. And that was something that we were discussing a little bit earlier on with Wan'Dale in previous pods was, hey, is there going to be a lot of this attention now to Nabers that he's now going to be able to take advantage of? And that is actually what is happening now. To not just from a talent standpoint, so people are now focusing on Nabers and they'll let you beat them with Wan'Dale. It is also the coaching staff that's sitting there understanding that and giving him targets, going on the 15-yard line, and instead of going to Nabers, they're going to him. They're using Nabers to get triple covered so he's wide open. So that's something that, like, for me, that's something I'm looking at of, hey, the coaches are trying to give him the ball in big situations. And mix that in with just generic, okay, he's open. You mix a little of that chemistry in, and like, yeah, he's definitely a solid asset to have.
One thing I will say for you, though, is that if you are playing in like a standard league, you know, I don't know many dynasty leagues that are playing standard anymore, but like if you're in a standard league, Wan'Dale ain't helping you much because a lot of this is coming on target share, right? A lot of it is PPR points, force feeding him the football because Nabers is covered and things like that, right? Now, one thing to also mention about Wan'Dale that I guess I would be a little concerned about for him is that he had a couple really, really costly drops in that game. Balls that hit him right in the hands. Like, NFL receivers should have no excuse for dropping some of the passes that he dropped. And again, it's not like he's a size winner. He's like a space winner. You've got to be able to catch the football and then move around in space, right? So if he's dropping key passes, here's my question. Does he maintain that target share?
I still think, because then you'd have to have someone else that is catching those passes. That would be my argument for it, is for him to lose that, someone else would have to be taking advantage of those targets. I'd be interested to see once all of week 4 is completed, but currently right now he's listed as wide receiver 13. in PPR.
He's been really nice in PPR.
Yeah. So that's just a situation of like, those numbers are definitely a little bit inflated right now because he has 4 games compared to so many other people still only having 3 games. That's something where it's like, yes, he's only got a touchdown in a game. That's, like you're saying, with standard. Like, he's not doing too much for you in standard. But yeah, in PPR, like having that consistent 9-10 points, that's not going to be you're not looking for that for a wide receiver 1, but him being your wide receiver 2 or 3 or something like that, where you just need your other guy starting to not sink the ship. That is who Wan'Dale Robinson is.
Let me ask you this, because I think that this is like a really interesting question that kind of offshoots of the Wan'Dale talk. Are cases like Wan'Dale Robinson being the PPR wide receiver 13 like the best argument for half point ever? Because like Wan'Dale in half point is like 12.6 scoring, right? And let's think about it. I mean, yes, he got a lot of targets, but he got 71 yards and he didn't get in the end zone. He just got 71 yards in the game and, was moving it up and down the field, whatever. But like, and he got rewarded. You get rewarded for half of those catches at least, right?
We'll use this to plug one of the settings we use in a lot of our leagues. Is we love doing to make people happy between half point and full point PPR. Is what we do in our leagues is we have half point reception, we have half point first down. So what it is we're rewarding the type of catch. We're rewarding like, okay, if this is just some dink and dunk, it got 2-3 yards, that's a half point. But if this person made a clutch 15-yard first down catch on 3rd and 8, then yes, we consider that a 1-point reception. So that's definitely if you're one of those people that like 1 point's insane, but half point, we need something a little bit more. You can use that setting. That's our food for thought for today.
Yeah. That definitely, I think, like does the best job of balancing your need of like getting the receivers a little bit bolstered for their contribution to the football game, but at the same time, not just rewarding empty catches like they're like a running back's first down. You know what I mean? Like that to me, I think strikes that balance the best. But okay, we are going to call that a wrap on today's episode. Everybody, thank you very much for tuning in with us. If you are listening weekly or just, to a few episodes or whatever, just can't thank you enough for tuning in. If you like what you hear, please like, subscribe, rate the podcast 5 stars wherever you see it, rate the YouTube, comment, interact, do all the stuff that basically helps this kind of get out into the world, because we are an independent podcast. We do depend on your support and we love to hear from you. So, Bobby, do we have an email that people can like email questions to us, or like a mailbag kind of thing?
You're always welcome to email us at Dynasty Fantasy Football Show at gmail.com. It is all one word, Dynasty Fantasy Football Show at gmail.com. You can always email us there. Give us suggestions for shows. We're always looking for new content to kind of suggest. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, cool. Yes, you can email us there or DM us on any of the social media platforms if you want to do that, because we may be starting like a little mailbag thing or something. Just thinking on that a little bit. So anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. I've been Alex Klausner. This is Bobby Carney, and this has been the Dynasty Fantasy Football Show, where Dynasty never sleeps. Everybody have a great day.